Greetings in the name of the Most High Yahuwah and his Son, Yahusha, to the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. I am Brother Hiram, and I am going to be bringing forth a lesson today, a teaching, and it's going to be entitled Put Away or Putting Away, according to Matthew chapter 19, verses 1 through 12. So, putting away, according to Matthew chapter 19, verses 1 through 12. Now, yesterday I did this in a live stream, but we ended up having some technical issues with the live stream. And this is why that I'm putting this same lesson on a pre-recorded video. And so it's going to be the same thing I put out yesterday. There will be a few things that I'm going to add to it. So it's not going to be the exact same. This is going to actually be more enhanced. It's going to be more full. But we're going to be dealing with Matthew 19. Now, some of you may already be aware, some of you may not, of the controversy regarding putting away. In the term putting away, there's a popular teaching that is circulating in the Israelite community saying that when Yahusha used the words put away or putting away, that he did not mean divorce. He only meant putting away, as in, let's say, like a separation, putting away without a divorce certificate. And so this is a relatively new teaching. This is spreading in the Christian churches. It's spreading amongst Torah people, like Messianic Jews and Hebrew roots and now Hebrew Israelites. And what it does is it turns the traditional teaching of divorce and remarriage pretty much upside down and inside out. That if this teaching is true, if Yahusha did not mean divorce when he spoke of putting away, then that basically exonerates just about everybody that is in the churches today that is divorced and remarried. If this teaching is true, then virtually all the people living in divorce and remarriage are okay. They're not in adultery. Everything is just fine. Because we know there's a divorce epidemic out there. In the United States of America, statistics say that more people are getting divorced than staying married. It's over 50%. I've heard numbers like 60, 70, 80%. But I think the consensus is that it's above 50%. More people are getting divorced than staying together. And as a result of that, you have churches and ministries, and even in this remnant walk, you have people that are divorced and remarried. That's why it is of critical importance that we get to the bottom of this, because we have to understand we're living in the last days, and there's going to be a lot of deception in the last days, so much so that the very elect would be deceived if it were possible. And so what that requires us to do, those of us who say that we are Yah's remnant, those of us who say that we are on the narrow road and not on the broad road, that we can't be ignorant of the devil's devices. That when we look at the deception that has taken place all throughout history, starting in the garden, and going all the way through the history of our people with the false prophets that we read about in Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and all the way up to our day, we see that there is a consistent pattern when it comes to false prophets, false teachings, that the original false teaching, the original deception in the garden was that Yah gave a specific command concerning a specific thing. And we know what happened with the serpent and Hawa or Eve, that just to make a long story short, that in the mind of Hawa, in the mind of Eve, the serpent turned Yah's no into a yes. And if you read all throughout the scriptures, you read about false prophets, false teachers, that they follow the same pattern by turning Yah's no's into yeses. And so this is what is going to characterize the end time deception, that there are going to be people that they believe that they're all right. They believe that they're all right because their pastors, their teachers, their prophets have told them that things that are not all right with Yah are all right. They've told these people that you're okay doing what you're doing when it's not okay. That was the same that was the same pattern with the false prophets in Jeremiah. Read about that in Jeremiah, read about that in Ezekiel. The false prophets were the ones saying peace, peace, when there was no peace. And so the reason why that is so effective on mankind to turn Yah's no's into yeses is because that's what our flesh wants to hear. You know, our flesh wants the easy way out. Our flesh wants to be accommodated. Our flesh does not want to be crucified, so to speak. Our flesh does not want to be put to death. It wants to fulfill itself. And so when the temptation comes of a false prophet or a false teacher turning Yah's no's into a yes, that's very tempting. You know, we tend to want to believe that. You know, there's a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And so that's why I'm bringing this. This is serious, brothers and sisters. This is life and death. This is heaven and hell that we're talking about here, because you cannot afford to miss the boat on this topic that I'm speaking about. Many of you cannot afford to miss the boat on this. I mean, if you are wrong, if you are wrong about this topic right here, it could have eternal consequences. So I say that with sobriety. So as we get into this, we're going to deal with Matthew 19. I believe Matthew 19 is the best place to go when we want to answer the question, when Yahusha used the term put away, did he mean divorce or did he just mean putting away by itself, putting away as in a separation, putting away without a divorce certificate? What did Yahusha mean when he made his judgment concerning divorce and remarriage? You know, when he said that whosoever shall put away his wife and marries another commits adultery, and whosoever shall marry her who's put away from her husband commits adultery. And, whosoever puts away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her to commit adultery. And if a woman puts away her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. What did he mean? When he said put away, what did he mean? Did he mean divorce, or did he mean just putting away without a divorce certificate? If he meant putting away without a divorce certificate, just about everybody on the earth is okay. Nobody is in divorce, remarriage, adultery, as it's traditionally been called. Almost nobody would be guilty of that. Everybody, just about, would be all right. If he does mean divorce, if he does mean putting away as the final step of divorce, a lot of people in this end time hour are in trouble, because a lot of people are in adultery, even as I speak. So that's how serious this matter is. But Matthew 19, there's so much to unpack with Matthew 19. There really is. And I'm going to help you unpack it today. And hopefully that will help you to see and to understand the truth of this matter. So let's go ahead and start in with this. Matthew 19:1. It says, and it came to be when Yahusha had ended these words that he left Galilee and came to the borders of Yehuda beyond the Jordan, and large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. And the Pharisees came to him, trying him, saying to him, "Is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason?" Now, I'm reading from the Hallelujah Scriptures, so it may be different from what you're reading from, but that's what I'm reading from in this. And so I want to point out a couple things about what we just read here. Now, we see that large crowds followed him. There was a lot of people looking on when this was taking place. And the Pharisees came trying him. Why would the Pharisees come and try him like this? It's like, what interest would the Pharisees have in what Yahusha has to say concerning divorce? Well, if we go back to Matthew 5, we'll come back to Matthew 19, but if we go back to Matthew 5, and Yahusha makes a statement, which a lot of us Israelites have probably quoted many times. And that's in Matthew 5, verse 17, starting in 17. "Do not think that I came to destroy the Torah or the Nevi'im. I did not come to destroy, but to complete. For truly I say to you, till the Shamayim and the earth pass away, one yod or one tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the reign of the Shamayim. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the reign of the Shamayim. For I say to you that except unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the Shamayim." So there we see Yahusha taking the Pharisees' name in his mouth now. So the Pharisees heard that, hey, this man's throwing shade. This man's talking about us. Okay, he mentioned them, mentioned the Pharisees, and said, your righteousness must exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees if you're going to enter the kingdom. So what is the obvious implication? The obvious implication is the scribes and Pharisees are not entering the kingdom. Now, he didn't just leave it with a subtle statement like that, but he said it overtly in Matthew 23. He said that you shut the door to the kingdom of Yah, that you hinder those from entering in that are entering in, and you yourselves don't enter in. So he told them explicitly they are not entering into the kingdom. He said that they travel sea and land to find one proselyte, one convert. When they found him, they make him twofold child of hell as themselves. So he called them children of hell, and he called their doctrine leaven. He said, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. And so when we read through that, we see that he was talking about the doctrine of the Pharisees, that he said that if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. He said they be blind leaders of the blind. And so Yahusha did not have nice things to say about the Pharisees and specifically about their teachings. He clearly exposed the Pharisees as false teachers, and they were teaching the people falsely. And so we have to understand what's going on here in Matthew chapter 5, that he not only talks of a righteousness that you must have to enter the kingdom, and it's a righteousness that exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, but he demonstrates it in his teaching. A lot of these statements that he makes where he said, you've heard that it hath been said, these were the rabbinical teachings. This is what the scribes and Pharisees were teaching the people. And he would say, but I say unto you, in every single case in Matthew 5, where he's bringing out these teachings, he's taken things higher. He's demonstrating, he's showing the people a righteousness that exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. Scribes and Pharisees told people not to commit adultery, but Yahusha takes us beyond that. So whosoever shall look at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. They weren't teaching that. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's an example of the righteousness that exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. Well, in regard to divorce, in verse 31 of chapter 5, Yahusha said, "And it has been said, whoever puts away his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever puts away his wife, except for the matter of whoring, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a woman who has been put away commits adultery." Now, when it says, whoever puts away his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. So he said, it has been said. Where has that been said? Now, most people will say, well, that's talking about Deuteronomy 24. That's what that said. Well, actually, not. Praise Yahuwah, because Deuteronomy 24 begins by saying that when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes. So this is talking about a specific situation and a specific time frame. And so Deuteronomy 24 does not say whosoever, praise Yahuwah, but the Pharisees turned it into a whosoever. Praise Yah. And they turned it into a doctrine. They turned Deuteronomy 24 into a doctrine which states that whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce, and that's all you need. You don't need any good reason to put your wife away. You just need that certificate of divorce. And the majority of the majority belief at the time of Yahusha was the belief of the Hillel school of the Pharisees. This was the liberal school. They believed that you could put away a wife for every reason. This is why they marched up on him and asked him if it's right to put away a wife for every reason or for any cause, as it would say in the King James, I believe. But anyway, so they turned it into just pretty much an anything goes doctrine when it comes to divorce. And what you must realize, if you believe this put away doctrine, if you believe that Yahusha was only addressing putting away without a divorce certificate, then what you're doing is you're putting Yahusha on the level of the Pharisees and making them to basically teach the same thing. That you're saying that Yahusha and the Pharisees taught the same thing when it comes to divorce and remarriage, because that's what the Pharisees believed. All you need is a bill of divorce, and you're legit to divorce and remarry for any reason. The Hillel school. Now, the Shammai school was the minority school. That was the conservative school. They believed that it had to be sexual sin that would be the reason to divorce a woman. But that wasn't the majority belief. The majority belief was the liberal belief that you could do it for any reason as long as you had a bill of divorce. And so as we read through this, we see even from Matthew chapter 5 that Yahusha and the Pharisees were not speaking the same thing. All right. There would be no reason for him to cite their teaching and then to take the people higher and say, but I say unto you, if they taught the same thing. They did not teach the same thing. Yahusha, even in the matter of divorce, taught a righteousness that exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. Praise Yahuwah. So anyway, let's go back to Matthew 19, because I wanted to show you why the Pharisees marched up on him like this about the matter of divorce, because they already knew what he taught. They already heard about this. I mean, I don't know if Pharisees were present on the Sermon of the Mount, but no doubt word got back to them that Yahusha took their name in his mouth. Praise Yah. Yahusha was throwing shade, as they say. Praise Yah. And not only that, Yahusha challenged their teaching. He took people higher than what they were teaching on this subject. And so that's why they're here doing what they're doing here in verse 3. And coming and trying him, challenging him, saying to him, is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason? Now, we're dealing with the term putting away. And what we have to understand is that if you study the Mishnahs, you'll see the position of the different schools of the Pharisees concerning divorce, but you'll also see that all of the Pharisees believed in the issuing of the bill of divorce, that you had to have a bill of divorce if you divorced a woman. There is an entire section of the Mishnahs with all the little details and knickknacks and laws and rulings they came up with concerning the giving of the bill of divorce. Praise Yahuwah. Do you have to give it into her hand, or can you throw it to her from a second store balcony, or can you hand it to her while she's asleep? They came up with all of these painstaking little rules, but it was all surrounding the idea of giving the bill of divorce. The Pharisees definitely believed in the giving of the bill of divorce if you're going to put a woman away. And so it's important to know that, because when they come and ask him this question, is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason? Why would they say for every reason if they only meant putting away a woman without a divorce certificate? What reason is legitimate for doing that? You see? So it doesn't make sense for them to say, is it right for a man to put away his wife for every reason if they weren't talking about divorce? Praise Yahuwah, because that was the one thing that the Pharisees were divided amongst one another on, that legitimate reasons for divorce. And this is what they were divided against Yahusha on. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's the first thing I want to point out, is even the question that they asked lends itself more to a discussion about divorce and not about merely putting away without a certificate of divorce. Now, verse 4, and he answering said to them, did you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother and join unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, so that they are no longer two but one flesh. Therefore, what Elohim has joined together, let man not separate. Now, what we need to realize here is that this was Yahusha's answer to their question, period. If they would have accepted this answer and walked away, he wouldn't have said anything else about it. This is his answer. And you notice where he went for the answer. He went all the way back to the beginning. He went to Genesis for his answer to their question. Praise Yahuwah. And so he makes a very strong statement confirming marriage permanence here, based upon Genesis 1:27, Genesis 2:24. And so if the Pharisees merely meant putting away a woman without a divorce certificate when they asked this question, why would he answer like this? Why would he answer with such a strong confirmation of marriage permanence if they weren't talking about divorce? Praise Yahuwah. So I'm going to move on here. Verses 7 and 8 say, they say to him, why then did Masha command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? He said to them, because of the hardness of your hearts, Masha allowed you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. Praise Yahuwah. So I want to point out a couple things about these two verses here. One thing I want to point out is that Yahusha took the Pharisees to Genesis for the answer to their question. The Pharisees tried to steer the conversation back to Deuteronomy 24. Yahusha steered the conversation right back to Genesis. Did you catch that? I say that because in the Israelite community, people put such a heavy emphasis on Deuteronomy 24, and they try to get their own understanding and interpretation of that and live by that, not knowing that Yahusha took Deuteronomy 24 into consideration when he made his ruling. And he decided not to base his ruling on Deuteronomy 24, but he based his ruling on Genesis. It's still Torah. Torah is the first 5 books, right? He still based his judgment on Torah. He just based it on the Torah that was from the beginning. Praise Yahuwah. He did not base it upon Deuteronomy 24. And we know that because that's what the Pharisees based their ruling on. And that's where they tried to steer him in answer to this question. But Yahusha clearly steered them right back to Genesis for the answer to their question. And so it's clear, brothers and sisters, that Yahusha's ruling concerning divorce and remarriage was based upon the Torah given from the beginning in Genesis and not based upon Deuteronomy chapter 24. And so I know a lot of people are hung up on that because they say, well, no, Brother Hiram, you just quoted in Matthew 5, or not one jot or one tittle shall pass from the Torah till all be fulfilled. So what do you say about Deuteronomy 24 then? And so what I say is the same thing Yahusha's saying, is that Deuteronomy 24, that was not written for the purpose of establishing doctrine concerning divorce and remarriage. That wasn't the purpose of that. Praise Yahuwah. And that's not where you're going to find your answer. If you're asking the same thing as the Pharisees, is it right for a man to put away his wife for every cause? That's not where you're going to find your answer. You're going to find your answer in Genesis, not Deuteronomy chapter 24. What the Pharisees did and what a lot of Israelites are doing, because they're following the Pharisees and not following Yahusha like they think they are, praise Yahuwah, is they're misusing and misapplying Deuteronomy chapter 24. Praise Yahuwah. Deuteronomy chapter 24, all you have to do is just read all the way through it to see that that is absolutely not an example for the rest of us when it comes to divorce and remarriage, for example. I mean, look at the situation in Deuteronomy 24. Look at this is a horrible situation, especially for the woman, that here the woman is being bounced from one man to the next man. And this is a hypothetical situation. Here that the first man gives her a bill of divorce for a reason. So he finds some uncleanness in her. Okay. And this is when a man has taken a wife and marries her, and it happens she finds no favor. So there's a time frame with that too. Praise Yahuwah. But a man does this. Now he has a reason. It's some uncleanness he finds, writes her a bill of divorce, puts it in her hand, sends her out of his house. The second scenario is, the second hypothetical scenario is a man hating her and writing a bill of divorce, putting it in her hand, and sending him out of his house merely because he hates her. No reason. No reason. Praise Yahuwah. And so what the Pharisees did was they made it a big debate over, hey, what is this uncleanness? What's the uncleanness? And so one group of Pharisees came up with the idea that, well, you can put away a woman for every cause. The other one said, no, it's based on this uncleanness. And so that's what divided them. But the thing is that there are two scenarios here. There's not just a man giving this woman a bill of divorce for the uncleanness. There's another man giving her a bill of divorce merely because he hates her. So if it's all right for a man to divorce a woman for some kind of uncleanness, is it also all right for a man to divorce a woman because he hates her? I mean, we see both scenarios. Why are we going to take one scenario and leave the other one out? See, that shows right there that that was never meant to be an example of divorce and remarriage for the rest of us to follow, because that's a terrible example. It's a terrible situation, especially for the woman. Praise Yahuwah. And so Yahusha made that clear that no, that's not where you're going to find that answer. Praise Yahuwah. This was an allowance that was made because of the hardness of the hearts. And we see the hardness of the men's hearts demonstrated even within Deuteronomy chapter 24. We see the hardness of their hearts. Praise Yahuwah. This was an allowance that was made from the beginning. It was not so. But what did Yahusha did? What did he do? He brought us back to the beginning. It's still Torah. Praise Yahuwah. That supreme creational Torah law of marriage. Genesis 2:24. Praise Yahuwah. That's always been there. He didn't push it aside, praise Yahuwah, in order to execute Deuteronomy 24, because you'll notice, and I don't have time to go into it right now. You would have to go back to my channel, look at the series I did on Deuteronomy 24, and I break all this down for you, praise Yahuwah. But if you look at how Deuteronomy 24 is really written, and especially in the original Hebrew, you will see that nowhere is there a commandment or instructions or even an approval given for divorce and remarriage. Praise Yahuwah. It just gives a situation, praise Yahuwah, and it shows how this situation is being dealt with. But there is no command, there is no instruction, there is no approval given to what we're seeing here in Deuteronomy 24. So go look up that teaching series, and I break that down very plainly and clearly. So back to what we're talking about here, that it's crystal clear what Yahusha exalted above everything else when he made his judgment regarding divorce and remarriage. He exalted Genesis. He exalted that which is from the beginning, not Deuteronomy 24. This is what the Pharisees were trying to do, and he corrected them. He steered the conversation back to Genesis and made his ruling based upon Genesis. And this was his ruling. Verse 9. And I say to you, this is what it says in the Hallelujah scriptures, whoever puts away his wife except on the grounds of whoring and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her who has been put away commits adultery. So back to the question of what did Yahusha mean when he said put away? Well, we already saw what the Pharisees meant. Okay, and what the Pharisees meant is even confirmed in verse 7. Praise Yahuwah. Because verse 7, when they said, why then did Mashah command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? The Pharisees clearly tied the putting away together with the certificate of divorce, showing that it's one process. It's a three-part process. You write the bill of divorce, put it in the woman's hand, send her out of your house. It's a three-part process, but nonetheless, it is one process. And so we see the Pharisees combining two elements of the one process, which is the divorce process. Said, why then did Mashah command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? And notice how Yahusha answered that. He said unto them, because of the hardness of your hearts, Mashah allowed you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. So, question, did Mashah or Moses allow the people to put away their wives without a divorce certificate or without a bill of divorce? No, he did not. Praise Yahuwah. So here we see Yahusha only using the term put away, but what he means is the same thing that the Pharisees meant in verse 7. And then when they originally asked the question, what the Pharisees clearly meant, if you keep this in context, is that they meant the final stage of the divorce process. That's what they meant. And they clarified that in verse 7. That's what they meant, and Yahusha answered them accordingly. So when Yahusha said, put away in verse 8, he's clearly talking about the final stage of divorce, because if he's talking about putting away without a divorce certificate, then that's not a true statement. Masha did not allow the people to merely put away their wives. Praise Yahuwah, without a divorce, without a bill of divorce. Praise Yahuwah. He allowed the people to put away their wives with a bill of divorce. But Yahusha just used the term put away in verse 8. So in verse 9, he continues in the same thought. He doesn't switch it up in verse 9 and now all of a sudden he's talking about putting away without a bill of divorce. I mean, can you imagine the kind of confusion that would bring to the large crowds that were listening? That here from verses 1 to verse 8, they're clearly talking about the divorce process. They're not talking about just putting away without a bill of divorce. And for him to switch it up in verse 9, and now I'm talking about merely putting away like that, that would bring confusion. And Yah is not the author of confusion. Keep in mind, he's saying this in answer to a question that the Pharisees gave them, and the Pharisees, all of them were united in the belief that you need a bill of divorce in order to put a woman away. Praise Yahuwah. And so by this time, some of you may be convinced of what I have taught you, that the putting away that Yahusha spoke, he's making reference to the final stage of the divorce process. He's not making reference to putting away without a divorce certificate. Some of you are not convinced. Some of you still believe that he's talking about merely putting away and nothing else. And, you believe I'm wrong. You believe I'm in error with this. Well, let's do this. All right. Let's let the Talmudim and Yahusha himself, let's let them be the final arbiter. Let's let them be the final judge of what's right here. Okay, what is the right answer? What did Yahusha mean when he said put away? Praise Yahuwah. So we're going to see it confirmed one way or the other by the response of the Talmudim, the disciples. Verse 10. This is after Yahusha made his ruling now. His Talmudim said to him, if such is the case of the man with his wife, it is good not to marry. Yahusha often spoke things to his Talmudim that astonished them. You remember when he was dealing with the rich young ruler? In fact, he's dealing with the rich young ruler later on in this chapter, and how Yahusha made the statement that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of Yah, kingdom of heaven, and how they were astonished, beyond measure, and said, who then can be saved? And so Yahusha often said things that were just astonishing. And so this was one of them. They were astonished at his judgment, and they had concluded that, man, it's just good not to marry if this is the case. Praise Yahuwah. So let me ask you something. If Yahusha only meant putting away without a bill of divorce, does it make sense that they would be astonished at that, even to the point of saying that it's good not to marry? I mean, what is so hard about issuing a bill of divorce to a woman? Why would that cause somebody to even choose not to marry rather than to go forward with that? However, if he is talking about the final step of the divorce process, then their astonishment makes sense. I mean, with the easy divorce and remarriage that was going on under the teaching of the Pharisees, now under the teaching of Yahusha, a lot of people in that time would be finding themselves in adultery. Whosoever marries her who's put away from her husband commits adultery. And so a lot of people, even people listening to him, according to Yahusha's teaching, were in adultery and did not even realize it. And so we see how, with the strictness of his teaching, that a lot of people are going to find themselves in adultery. And so because of that, hey, it's just good not to marry. It's good not to marry for that reason, but it's also good not to marry because you don't have an easy way out like the Pharisees teach. Pharisees taught, the Hillel school anyway, the Pharisees taught that if your woman burned the biscuits, then you could divorce her. But now that you know you don't have an easy way out, you can't just uh, divorce a woman for a silly reason. Praise Yahuwah. And you could be liable for that woman going and marrying another, committing adultery. You could be liable for that. That's what it says in Matthew 5. And so there are so many ways you could get in trouble, and you could be stuck with a woman you don't want to be with, that, man, it's just good not to marry. Now, doesn't that make a lot more sense that Yahusha is talking about the final stage of divorce when he says put away? And that's what made them so astonished, because that this was a stricter teaching than what the Pharisees were teaching. That now we see that it's not anything goes when the whistle blows like the Pharisees taught. Praise Yahuwah, but it's a stricter teaching. It makes a lot more sense that they were astonished at that, rather than him saying that you just merely needed a bill of divorce and him just teaching the same thing. Why would they be astonished at him teaching the exact same thing as the Hillel school of the Pharisees? What would be astonishing about that? Praise Yahuwah. So we see here that the Talmudim confirm that Yahusha was indeed talking about the final stage of divorce. By their response, by their reaction, by their astonishment, we see that Yahusha was talking about putting away as the final step of divorce, just like the Pharisees were talking about. Praise Yahuwah. When they asked the question and when they asked the counter question of verse 7. Now, in verse 12, this is the perfect time for Yahusha to correct the Talmudim and tell them, oh, no, wait, you don't understand. You don't understand. I was only talking about putting away without a divorce certificate. That's the perfect time for Yahusha to straighten that out, but that's not what he did. He confirmed their understanding. He confirmed just even their astonishment, because he said this, in verse 11 and 12, not all receive this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were so born from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the reign of the Shamayim. He who is able to receive it, let him receive it. So do you see that confirmation by Yahusha? And Yahusha's telling them, yeah, you're right. In thinking what you're thinking, you're right. And yeah, you are right. It is good not to marry in many cases. Praise Yah. And there are people that have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of Yah's sake. Praise Yahuwah. And I know people personally that have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of Yah, people that were in a divorce remarriage situation, and Yahuwah revealed to them that they are in adultery. They got out. Praise Yahuwah. And so, people that were already divorced, contemplating remarriage, and then they heard the truth. And so now they're taking a stand and they're attending upon Yah without distraction, and just putting their trust in Yah. I know people personally that are fulfilling what Yahusha is saying here in verse 12. They've made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom. So why would a discussion about people making themselves eunuchs for the kingdom even be relevant if he was only talking about putting away without a bill of divorce? Praise Yahuwah. But if he was talking about, something much stricter than what the Pharisees were teaching, if he was talking about putting away as the final step of divorce, then it makes perfect sense for him to talk about people making themselves eunuchs for the kingdom, because there were people listening to him that would have to make themselves eunuchs for the kingdom, because they are in an adulterous marital situation by following the teaching of the Pharisees. Praise Yahuwah. So once again, this lesson is entitled Putting Away according to Matthew 19. So much in there that was unpacked. Praise Yahuwah. Answering the question, what did Yahusha mean when he said put away here in Matthew 19? Did he mean putting away without a bill of divorce, or did he mean putting away with a bill of divorce? I believe I answered that clearly. I believe I answered that in context. Praise Yahuwah. feel free to, if you have any other questions about that, feel free to leave them in the comments. Praise Yahuwah. So I do thank you for your time and going all the way through this video. I'm going to go ahead and shut it down with this. Praise Yahuwah. But brothers and sisters, don't be deceived. Don't be deceived by the devil just telling you what you want to hear, and the devil doing what he's done from the very beginning, trying to turn Yah's no's into yeses in the minds of men. Praise Yahuwah, and get us following after a way that seems right unto us, but the end thereof is the ends of death. The end thereof are the ways of death, to try to get us to follow follow the broad road, thinking that we're going to enter the kingdom. Praise Yahuwah, because broad is the road that leads to destruction. Many there be which go in thereat, but straight is the gate, narrow is the way that leads to life. Few there be that find it. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's what you have to ask yourself. Are you on the broad road or are you on the narrow road? If you still believe this put away doctrine where that he meant putting away without a bill of divorce, ask yourself the question, does that put you with the many or does that put you with the few? Praise Yahuwah. Because few are going to enter in through the straight gate. Many are going to go to destruction because they're on the wide gate. They think they're going to enter in, but they won't. It's like those people in Matthew 7 that said, Master, Master, did we not prophesy in your name, cast out devils, do many wonderful works? And then he said, he'll profess unto them, depart from me, ye that work iniquity, I never knew you. These people were workers of iniquity, and they didn't even know it. They thought they were saved. They thought they were going to enter the kingdom. Why? Because their teachers, their false prophets were smooth and very good at turning Yah's no's into yeses, making them believe that they were okay in the state that they were in. Now, we as Israelites, we like to use that passage against the Christians and say, aha, because they're not keeping the Sabbath and because they eat pork. And, that's what he's going to say to those Christians. He's going to tell them, depart from me, ye workers of iniquity, I never knew you. But what about those of us that keep the Sabbath, that keep the clean foods, keep the feast days, wear the tassels, wear the beards, but we're divorced and remarried? Praise Yahuwah. Is he going to say that to us too? Praise Yahuwah. So this is where, we gotta do some serious self-examination. That passage is not just for the Christians; it's for all of us. Praise Yahuwah. We don't want him to say that to us for any reason. Praise Yahuwah. For any reason at all. And here's the thing. Here's the thing, brothers and sisters, that we go from faith to faith and from esteem to esteem. This is a time of restoration. All right. Praise Yahuwah. If you are Yah's child and he loves you, then he's going to reveal to you. If you're in sin, if you're doing anything that's going to keep you from entering the kingdom, he's going to reveal it to you because he wants you to come out of it. Praise Yahuwah. It doesn't mean that, you're not his child or he doesn't love you. No, the Ruach guides us into all truth. Praise Yahuwah. And I am a man who, if you know me, I am a man who I always want to keep a tender heart before Yahuwah. Praise Yahuwah. A tender heart that I don't want to be an old dog that can't be taught new tricks. Praise Yahuwah. That when the cloud moves, I want to move with the cloud. That's why I pray, I fast, I seek him, because I want to always move with the cloud, brothers and sisters. Praise Yahuwah. And so me talking about this and me saying that, hey, you could be one of the ones who Yahusha saying, depart from me, you worker of iniquity, I never knew you. If you're in divorce and remarriage, I'm not judging and condemning you. Praise Yahuwah. Now, I'm not in a divorce remarriage situation. My wife, she wasn't married previous. I wasn't married previous. So she is my covenant wife. I am her covenant husband. Praise Yahuwah. But there are other areas, praise Yahuwah, that the Most High has revealed to me over the years. So just 1 year ago or even 2 years ago, that I could have lost my soul. I could have died and went to hell. Praise Yahuwah. If I continued in the things that I was walking in that I didn't realize were sin. Praise Yah. And he revealed these things to me and opened my eyes. And so he gave me the opportunity to repent. And I'm not talking about like gross sin. I'm talking about stuff that just about everybody else is doing in the Israelite movement. Praise Yahuwah. And so that's what I'm talking about, where if you're his child, he'll reveal things to you. If you're doing things that will keep you from the kingdom, he'll reveal it to you and give you a chance to come up out of it. Praise Yahuwah. I believe that pertains to all of us. I mean, you'd be surprised. You would be surprised. And, if y'all are curious as to what some of these things are that the Most High has revealed to me, I'm going to eventually bring some of these things out. I'm going to wait till the right time, but I'm going to eventually bring some of these things out. Some things that are putting Yah's people in that Matthew 7 category. Praise Yah, we're doing a lot of things that we think are going to, get us in the kingdom, but there's also some sin in our life, some things we're doing that we don't even realize is sin, but it's going to keep us from the kingdom. Praise Yahuwah. So you stay tuned, because I'm going to eventually bring these things out, on this channel. Praise Yahuwah. And so this is why he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. We have to strive to enter in at the straight gate. For many, I say unto you, shall seek to enter, and they shall not be able. This is part of the striving to enter in at the straight gate. Praise Yahuwah. And that is just letting go of things, things that we like, things that give us pleasure, things that, put us in our comfort zone, letting go of things that are keeping us from entering the kingdom. Praise Yahuwah. Hallelujah. That's part of the striving to enter in, brothers and sisters. So be encouraged. Be encouraged. This may be the opportunity that Yah's giving you to get it right with him. This very video itself. And I'm not the only one out here. I'm not the only one out here teaching this. Praise Yah. I'm not the only one out here. And I want to say this one more thing before I close this video out. The idea of marriage permanence. Praise Yahuwah. You have some that are out there that wrongly assume that marriage permanence is something that originated in the Gentile churches, because they will label marriage permanence false church doctrine, churchianity, Christianity. And but the true origin of marriage permanence, that marriage permanence actually is original to Hebrew thought. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Damascus document, it talks about the Qumran community. These were Hebrews now. We're not talking about Gentiles, and this was before there was any Christians. Praise Yahuwah, before there was any Christianity. That they had a belief, a Genesis-based belief in marriage permanence. Now, they believe that a man is to have one wife for his entire lifetime. So because of that, they didn't believe in divorce and remarriage, and they didn't even believe in polygyny. Praise Yahuwah. They believe a man was to have one wife for his lifetime. This is what the Qumran community believed. So to say that marriage permanence is a Christianity, churchianity, false church doctrine, nope. It goes back further than the church, further than the Gentile church. Praise Yahuwah. Now, you want to talk about the Hebrew church, so to speak, the Hebrew assembly led by Peter, James, and John. Praise Yah. There's even historical evidence that they believed and taught marriage permanence. Praise Yahuwah. So this is not a Gentile churchy thing. That this comes from Hebrew thought, even back to the Qumran community with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I wanted to add that in there, because sometimes people say stuff like that to throw you off, say that stuff is false church doctrine, is Christianity, churchianity. And so it's kind of like the guilt by association, that you'll hear that and say, oh, I don't want to be like false Christianity, so I better not believe that. Praise Yah. And so the temptation is just to receive something like that and not do your due diligence. Praise Yahuwah. But I'm here to exhort you to prove all things, hold fast that which is good, do your due diligence. Praise Yahuwah, because may Yah be true and every man a liar. Praise Yahuwah, because we want the truth. We want to know the truth so that the truth may make us free. Praise Yahuwah. So, to the true sheep that hear his voice, keep building on the solid rock.